Now for the remote viewing results of our expedition to Serpo. Ufology, pop culture, and conspiracy theories aside, I wanted to ask the unbiased question: are there planets orbiting within the Zeta Reticuli star system? If the assigned remote viewer for this particular target did not turn in any results that resembled a star chart or planets orbiting a sun, I would not have done the Serpo target number 14. We would have moved on to a new assignment altogether. So the first step was for me as the tasker to set my intentions. Having downloaded an actual image of Zeta Reticuli, as we can see from Earth, I just meditated and focused on that image, while listening to the resonant frequency associated with Zeta Reticuli. To justify moving on to Target 14 and viewing Serpo, I needed to see a basic graphical overview of a star system. I would be looking for a central star, potentially surrounded by circular or elliptical orbits containing planets. I expected that I would likely only see one star in this image, since the two stars in the Zeta Reticuli star system are separated by at least 3,750 astronautical units. That's approximately 100 times the average distance between the Sun and Pluto. The remote viewer I tasked to observe this target was Henrietta, and not only did she draw the basic graphic overview of what I would expect a star system to look like, she also included a graphic representation of what I think is a Birkeland current, which could also double for the trade routes that were drawn in the Betty and Barney Hill star chart. I'll have to go into the explanation of what a Birkeland current is later in a different video. I think that'd be a bit too much to put here, but I will say that there's a lot of evidence through the remote viewing community that Ebens and other extraterrestrials supposedly use faster than light travel that is a direct result of the use of these Birkeland currents. For me, looking at this image, all of this data comes together to say that there are potentially 3 planets orbiting this star, with evidence to support the electric universe theory. She says stony, cement, concrete, canal-like, looks like a pattern burnt in rock, concentric, circular. What is the long canal-like crease? Flowy, fluidy, gravitational movement, transmitting outward, magnetic, field-like, energy lines, accelerating like a catapult, electromagnetic airplane catapult. In her summary, she says consists of lands, which I believe to be planets, structure, energy in motion. That energy in motion I consider to be both the elliptical or circular orbits of the planets, and those orbits, of course, being maintained by the electric filaments that connect it to its parent sun. She then goes on to say the central point, marked as black dot, which I believe to be the sun, seems to collect and concentrate energy and channel out via the tunnel, which was shown to act like a catapult, transforming energy to accelerated movement. Out of curiosity, since she mentioned this image may have been carved into stone or cement, it got me thinking about Prometheus again, how the people in that movie found ancient cave drawings that were meant to represent Zeta Reticuli. So I thought, what if there are ancient cave drawings or carvings that represent a star system, perhaps this star system? So I did a Google image search and found this. An ancient carving that closely resembles the image that Henrietta drew. This is the Linga Yoni, or Shiva Lingam, a carving found in an ancient Hindu temple in India. An emblem of generative power, a symbol of cosmic mysteries, the merging of microcosmos and macrocosmos. Now, for the purposes of this video, I won't go down the rabbit hole of what I found here. But before we move on, I will make one more note that these images, both Henrietta's image and the Linga Yoni, share a striking resemblance with the Bifrost used in the Marvel Thor movies. Here, finally, I'd like to mention the results presented by Malgorzata. She had an AOL of the Death Star from Star Wars. And though she wasn't necessarily viewing a cosmic weapon, she may have been viewing the very same aspects of our target that Henrietta had seen. So, to move forward, I'd have to say that my expectations were met by Henrietta. Further investigation of Zeta Reticuli seemed warranted. So we moved on to target number 14. Target number 14 was public and made available for anyone on the Future Applications for Remote Viewing page or Remote Viewing Practice Targets. Anyone on those two pages could have done this target and taken a trip to Serpo. I'd like to start with the results presented by RV Guy.
Target number 1312-0022, my RV summary. The target appears to be large, heavy, brown, round object with structures on or near it. Technology is involved. There appears to be natural and man-made objects surrounding or moving around the target. A man-made silver metallic object within sight of the target that uses technology. The target is off Earth in an open space area. Target includes human and non-humans that appears to be observation involved. There are mechanical, whirling, clanking, rumbling sounds, a sense of chemicals in the air. My AOLs included planets, satellites, moon, UFO, aliens, and robots. RV Guy.
I was impressed by his results because he properly drew and described an Eben village, according to the data presented on Serpo.org. This is an artist interpretation of what the Crystal Knight crew would have seen when the UFO ramp opened, after they had landed on planet Serpo. At the bottom of the image, you see the ramp. At the top of the image, you see the two suns. In the middle, you see the Eben village of small soil or clay-based huts. And central to the village, a tower, monolith, or spire that the Ebens use to schedule their daily activities, among other things. This sort of terrain and high temperature and high radiation levels from the suns is what was described on Serpo.org. RV Guy seemed to nail it, as did several of our other remote viewers. So, according to all of the remote viewing results presented, Zeta Reticuli does have planets orbiting it, and one of those planets appears to be inhabited, just as Serpo.org suggests. With those results in and analyzed, I decided to do something a little bit different this time. I wanted to post a feedback video that did not include any information from Serpo.org involving the planet Serpo itself. This feedback video would not include any of the remote viewing results. I specifically made this change because I wanted to separate people who were actually remote viewing the target from the people who were remote viewing the feedback video, and then using the feedback video to create their remote viewing results. It sounds confusing, but that exact thing has happened. This is the beginning of a very important dialogue between the remote viewer and the tasker. At this point, after the feedback video goes out, I wait an hour or two to see what remote viewers have to say about the target, what they may have left out that now they want to include. And what I didn't expect was to get an additional 25-page report from a very talented remote viewer that was on target. I feel very lucky to have had an opportunity to talk with this person directly. Over Zoom, of course. And now, without further ado, I'd like to share with you the discussion I've just had with Anita Ikonen. I've been looking forward to this for a long time because I never... I've done a bunch of remote viewing targets, but never received... I think you sent me more than 26 pages of amazing story. It was fantastic. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I had previously...
Your target signal was mwah.
I was going to ask you about that. Since you said it, I love... so when you say the target signal was good, I'll tell you what I did. Because I'll tell you what I did, but I was curious if you could elaborate on what a typical target signal is for you, and then how this current one was different.
Well, in my experience, targets from each tasker have a very unique flavor, feeling, quality to the signal, how it appears visually and what it feels like, and how the signal shows me the different components of the target site. You're one of the best taskers I ever did targets from. The signal was clear and bright, and the life form showed up as the significant element throughout. And I was also able to construct some of the technology which I saw the life form was working on. And towards the end of the session, I was shown a perfect visual image of the planet, which had rings around it.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I was so surprised when towards the end of the session, literally out of nowhere, I see a perfectly clear image of outer space with the planet, with the rings, which consist of rocks, similar to Saturn. Just out of nowhere. It came very late and I saw it about 2 times. So the planet definitely showed up, and it turned out to be a significant element in your tasking as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that's fantastic. That's I'm very pleased to hear that. And you had fun with the target?
Yes. Well, actually, no.
Oh, yeah.
I had to take a break pretty early in the session. I went into this session thinking I'm going to do a thorough job. I was committed to spending the whole day on it and to go through all of the steps that I use in my remote viewing method. To my surprise, very early, I had to take a break and have a nap because the life form which I connected with was making me feel very exhausted and drained, which is unusual. It's not just because of remote viewing, but from this life form. And I had to step away for a while. And then later I was able to resume. And at first I thought I wasn't going to be able to do this session in the thorough stepwise method that I had intended because it was so draining. But I decided to push through anyway, and I managed to complete the session in the thorough way without shortcuts. But I'm not entirely sure I would say that I enjoyed it. The life form was constantly wanting my attention and to talk to me, and something about the telepathic connection that I experienced that we had was very draining and exhausting. So it was a difficult session for me mentally, this one.
I see. And thank you so much for taking the time to take your session and pull all of the dialogue between you and the life form out for me and put it in chronological order. So what you just explained explains very well why the life form would say to you, "Oh, you're back again," and things like that. So
Yeah.
I was curious about that. So you had taken a break and you were kind of in and out of it. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's extremely important with integrity in remote viewing. I submitted to you before the feedback the report summary text, which was 2 pages. And out of the 5 drawings that I made, I submitted to you drawing 4 and 5, the 2 last ones, because it's considered bad RV etiquette to send to a tasker a drafty kind of 20 pages long full report. So I do want to mention that. The summary and the 2 last pictures are official. Fabian can verify that he got them before the feedback. The others I made before the feedback, but I submitted after. But I have a very high integrity when I remote view, so all of this material is genuine. So anyway, this
Well,
drawing is drawing number
actually,
5.
to add to what you were just saying, I would say that yes, I can verify that you sent me those two beforehand, and that right after I released the remote viewing video, is when you sent me the additional 25 pages. So I knew that you couldn't, in that brief time, type up this novel that you sent me. So yes, I was very impressed. I did not know the etiquette of not sending an entire report, but I did notice that, and I'll say it in my next video. I did notice that a lot of remote viewers will generally send me a little bit of their report. I'll read it over. Things look good that they have connected, and then after I do the reveal, that's when I'll get additional data that's absolutely incredible. That is very relevant to the target. You started by describing this being that you spoke with as a red being, and so could you tell us about the kind of the red color and what that is to symbolize? Is it kind of like a heat vision that you have?
Yeah, I suspect that the red color is possibly a thermal vision. Every time when there is a life form element on the target site, it will show up to me initially as a red irregular shape, which doesn't reveal what kind of a life form is it. Is it a human or an animal? A life form will always start out as a red colored, blurry, irregular shape. And it requires several steps of touch probing in order for it to gain some more clarity and to reveal its actual skin color and so forth. So the alien which I encountered on this target also started out as the initial impression, which was a red irregular shaped element. Initially, I was referring to this creature as a frog in the report because I like to give things some kind of a name. And I'm well aware that the name will change as the session progresses, as I learn more and as I gain more clarity and information about something. So the first name in my full report for this life form, which I encountered, was the red element life form, which is very generic and vague. And then I called it a frog. It was clear to me that it was some kind of an animal, not a human. Throughout the session, not a single time did I think it was a human, yet it was interacting with technology. So it became clear to me after some time that this is some kind of an extraterrestrial. And later I called it, later in the report, I call it an alien. I used that name. And the last name I had for it before I ended the session was Ancient Astronaut, but I didn't write that down anywhere. Names in my full text report changed because it's really a log of the progress that I go through. And if I write a report summary, it will have the most recent updated names in there only. So this creature went through a series of name changes within the full report as I get closer to understanding what this is.
So an evolution of data. It's wonderful
Yeah.
to be able to start and then build upon your data until you have a really great picture.
Yeah.
Awesome. I like your method. Okay, so I guess I would love to have you walk me through your session. You already have done some of that by saying how it starts with the elements, and then you kind of touch things until they kind of take form for you and you can tell what the dimensions are and things like that. Which reminds me, so as you were talking with the alien, he would say, "Stop pushing me," or "Why did you pat me?"
Yes.
So he was sensing
Yes.
your method. That's really
Absolutely.
incredible. That's
I know.
I, I don't even know how to take that.
I know it was exactly because every element that I encounter, when I use the full ETC method to do a very thorough job, which I intended to do on your target, every individual element which I encounter, I list in my report. And each of these will go through a series of probes early in the session. So each one will get a tap. So I will tap it. I do it about 3 separate times, and each time it creates this shock wave on the element, and this relays more and new information, or it can also reveal other hiding elements. So each element gets a series of taps. After that, they get a flick. I flick them, which is a harder form of tap. It's harder, it has more energy. After that, I will do a push probe, whereby if I have an element, I will push it into 6 different directions, into page, out of page, left, right, down, and up. This reveals, the push probe is, it reveals things such as, is the element attached to its surroundings? How heavy is it? How does it respond to being shifted? As well as other information which shows up, such as visual, and so forth. And then after that, I do the initial probe, which is simply put your hands on it, feel it around a little. And the element is still blurry. It doesn't have the clarity or the focus. So the initial probe with the hands on, it's just a starting touch, because later I will do it more thoroughly. So the alien was going to go through all of my set of probes, and it sensed every single one of them, and it responded. And I had to write in the report to myself a note: just stick with the session, but don't push, probe, or touch this alien anymore.
That is very respectful of you. Wow. Okay, that was very delightful to read. Wow. So your this being sensed your mental pushes, and
Oh,
that
yes.
I found that very entertaining. If you want to walk me through the story of the session.
Well, it's a lengthy report. It's more than 20 pages, and I spent many hours on it. So the initial element was the life form. It was the first thing that came to me. It was the red-colored, irregular worm shape, which I always know is a life form. And for most targets, a life form is going to be a human or an animal, but obviously you never go into a session assuming anything. A target can be anything. So I write down there's the life form, and I encounter some other initial elements, which I wrote down, various shapes and structures. I actually started out in a forest, and it looked like New Zealand. It looked like fern trees. It had a yellow sky. The air was different, and it was somewhat wet and swampy. And there was this life form there. And initially, I then referred to the life form in my report as a frog. It was bipedal. It was large enough, and it was touching and interacting with items and technology. So I had this amphibian type frog, and I watched it interacting with items and building and working with something. And this creature could run really, really fast, incredibly fast. And I wrote in my report, this thing runs faster than any human could. And also its thoughts were running really quickly. And this was making me feel very exhausted because I was connecting with its mind. I started to reconstruct the technology which I saw it was working on. It turns out that he was recording the history of his people into a device which creates a written language around the exterior of this device. And what the creature then told me is that his people had chosen to do a war with another people, and then this creature's people lost the war, and now they were having to leave their home. But first they were recording their history, and they would bury it into the ground, and they would hope that someone in posterity will find this device and learn their history. So I spent a great deal of time looking at this device. It was very strange. However, I noted that there was a distinct lack of, for instance, electronics or computer chips and things like that were completely missing in this structure. And the components themselves came across to me as fairly primitive, such as something which reminded of a basic battery with the two metal plates for the electrodes and some wire connecting the two sides. A lot of the components were very familiar. There's also a moving needle, which reminds me of a lie detector test, which was reading the voice of the creature and correspondingly translating it into the writing on the structure. And some components were strange. There was a long tube coming from the device, which contained metal on the inside. And on the exterior of this tube were several small little dark spikes of metal, which are fitted into the ground. And this metal has been made to dissolve very easily. So it reminded me of some type of a fuse, where a fuse is a metal which is made intentionally to melt easily so that it breaks the connection for the electricity and therefore creates a shortage of the electrical current, which will then trigger some type of an electrical response. The creature also mentioned explosives, and I did see smoke, and I smelled the smoke. And explosives were presumably used in this war. Most of the session showed me the creature and the device with which they are recording their history for posterity. That's what the target chose to show me, as well as the planet towards the end. And the creature itself chose to tell me about the wars and about his people having to leave because of the war. I did not see any spaceships. I did see a structure which was in space, close to the planet, and it was emitting a sound of some kind of, maybe not a sound, but a signal which conveys the sound towards the planet, possibly from the recording device as well. So it was a very technical target as well as biological with a life form.
Mm-hmm.
And very outer space, alien themed.
The fun stuff. Yeah. Well, wonderful. One of the other things I really enjoyed, you went into a lot of detail, and what I always look for when I'm looking at remote viewing results is how many people are saying the same thing. And very people that took the time to put things into words. A few people sent me pictures and really a few sentence summaries, and then other people just sent me a typed summary and no pictures. And one of the things I really enjoyed is that everyone seemed to describe very similar things. I'll mention here Patrick Flanagan specifically described a device that's very similar to what you just described.
Really?
The I think he described it as a metallic device with inscriptions around it. He put it in some certain wording, and I could dig through paperwork and try and find it right now, but it was interesting how he and several others seemed to touch on the same kind of technology that you were finding. And many of them described it as a monolith, which I found very interesting. That it was embedded in the ground, but it also had a portion that went high up into the air. So I found that very interesting. You seemed to describe what it did and all kinds of detail that I thought was fantastic, where some of the others just said it involves technology and left it at that. And so everybody has different strengths in terms of there are those who want to look at the technology and there are those who want to speak to the organism. You did both. So thank you for giving me all that to work with. I think you mentioned everything that I remember from your report. I read through the whole thing and I read it like it was a novel. I just kind of sat back and just read through and I loved that you took the time to record that much detail. So thank you so much for doing this target. All right, now I'm going to navigate away from our screen for a moment because I'd like to pull up some of your pictures so that maybe you can go through, describe what each of the pictures are, even though you just kind of walked me through the story. Now, if I know what each picture is, then I can show it as you're describing things.
All right. So the first picture, basically, I have drawn the initial elements, as I call them, the first colored shapes that the signal shows to me. So the first ones I drew are in the top left, such as you see the red element life form with the two legs. It's walking towards the ladder and it's carrying a box. And I've drawn some green color on the skin. We also have a white structure next to it, which I initially called a white lotus flower, which later in session turned out, as I gained more clarity, turned out to be a structural component inside of the recording device. Also see, for instance, on the center to the left, a gray colored bowl or dish. It was incredibly thin. It was literally like one layer of molecules thick, and it had been made where it will dissolve very easily. It was also part of the technology. And various other parts. There were many organic, the red large element on the top left was some type of an organic floral structure. And all of the green is some type of nature. And on the bottom right, we see the frog, as I called the alien initially a frog. And it's holding this tube which connects to the recording device. And you see the gray cylindrical recording device with the text inscriptions on the exterior surface. We also see a green forest with a fence. And all of these components are better described in the full report. So this is the first drawing I drew. It has, which is typical for my ETC RV method, it has the individual pieces scattered on the page. We don't yet know how they connect and fit together. So that's the first drawing I have. This is then picture 2. And you see I have written the target number, of course, and under it I have written paper tracing. Paper tracing is one of my approximately 30 different types of probe methods. Paper tracing involves that I first collect an element from the target signal, which in this case was the red life form in the very center, which is holding the box. And what I do with paper tracing is that I simply feel with my pen into different directions from that element, and I can feel what's there and how do things connect and how do things continue. So this was all done with paper tracing. You can see that I have moved to the left and I found these wires and found something on top of the creature's head and some wires connect to it, and I wrote antenna. And you can see that on this one, we start to see that pieces are connecting together a little bit more, but it's still a little bit distorted. For instance, the cable which the creature is holding on to appears 2 times, at least 2 times on this drawing. On the bottom where I wrote antenna, and also on the top where you see the musical notes. It's the same. And so things are still kind of scattered on the page, distorted. I don't fully yet know at this stage where does everything sit. But you see that the pieces are starting to be connected with each other a bit more. For instance, we see that this cable connects to the gray box on the top right. So we've made that connection. And yeah, so it was definitely this creature interacting with this technical device. And this device was able to play music or some kind of sound and had all these components that I was looking at. And yeah, we could go on to picture 3 if you don't have any questions.
Yes, I think I'm ready.
All right. So picture 3. Picture 3 was also a paper tracing. And for this one, I'm not sure anymore, but I think the element that I started with, well, it was either the red life form or the gray object, which I drew first. When I do a paper tracing, I call it a reliable element from the target signal. So I will revisit the target number and connect with the target signal. It shows me one element. I draw that one element because I see it as a colored shape. And then as this again is a paper tracing picture, I have then felt on this drawing, what do we have on the different sides next to this element, and then I can draw. So this one again shows the life form interacting with this technical device, which is wires and parts. All right, so this is picture 4, which I submitted to Fabian in my official report to the tasker, because on this picture we already have attained some connections between the different elements and components and where things fit together. It's not as scattered. And we also see that I have drawn the same thing from different perspectives. The cylinder is drawn several times, but from different angles. We can see it from the outside and from the inside. This was a technical device which the creature was somehow speaking into, and it takes the voice and translates it into written language on the exterior surface of this device. The writing can be seen on the exterior surface, but the same writing can also be seen when you're inside of this structure. You can go inside of it. There's a ladder which you can climb. There's a hole in the center of this cylinder. This whole cylinder structure, it is the recording device. It's one and the same. And it uses this interesting tube, which I have drawn in beige. It it was, the creature was holding it, and it was somehow able to record his messages, which then get conducted along the inside metal of this tube, where there is, you see in the center of picture 4, you see these 3 hooks. They are like a lie detector test needle, which moves in response to the sound transmission and creates language and records the language. And I also have here drawn a planet with rings, and I wrote Saturn. And I remember thinking during the session, but this planet doesn't have the hexagon on the top, which Saturn has. But it didn't occur to me that this could be an extraterrestrial planet outside of our solar system. I wasn't thinking logically, because when you remote view, you have to disconnect your logic and just receive and not think about what you're getting. So, yeah, we see a lot of the structure here, and it has what I drew these bars from the inside of the structure, and I wrote emitter. It was radiating something, radiation or heat or sound or something was radiated by it. And yeah, and I wrote sonogram, which I think I looked up the word after the session. Sonogram is the same as is it infrared imaging or ultrasound or something?
I think
but
I've heard that in relation to ultrasound.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how it relates here, but RV wanted me to have that word, so I wrote it. Yeah, so we start to see the pieces come together, and we also have the planet now, a planet. So there was this outer space theme very evidently as a strong feature of this target. We could go to picture 5.
Actually, I do have a question on picture 4.
Yeah.
At the bottom of picture 4, it looks like you have 5 red beings standing before a tall clock tower kind of thing.
Exactly that.
Okay. So exactly that. You is that what you intended? If that's what you intended to draw there, I have some feedback on that.
Really?
Yes.
What?
So now, of course, me doing my research before assigning this target, I go on to the web pages and I do my research and find what I expect you guys to see. And on the serpo.org page, where they describe what this extraterrestrial civilization looks like, and they describe the average village, the average village of an Eben, they say that it's a bunch of these smaller homes, and at the center of their village is this very tall monolith-like clock tower. Is how they're describing it. So when I saw the clock tower in your image, and they describe it as a clock tower because it is what the Ebens use to schedule their day. And so when I saw you draw that, I thought, I know what that's supposed to be. So I thought that was very interesting. I was curious, though, if the clock tower was the same structure as the structure that had the engravings that was recording the history for posterity, or were those 2 separate technologies?
I'm not sure at this stage. And it's not possible to make assumptions or to guess. So I'm just going to say I don't know.
Yeah, at this point, I guess yeah.
It's not possible to fill in the blanks or make connections outside of the session. So I don't know, basically.
Okay, and that's the perfect answer. I just was curious if you happen to have any thought on that prior to closing the session that you didn't mention in there or something like that. But if you did not, then I would not want to speculate. So that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for telling me that.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, I will be also sharing that in the video. So you'll get to see even more feedback than what I just told you. But I was glad to be able to share that with you.
Now we're on picture 5. So this is the last one I drew. This is this is the conclusion of the session. I only submitted picture 4 and 5 to Fabian as the official report, because pictures 1, 2, and 3 are what I use to figure things out, to look around, to build, to have these elements, scattered pieces, and figure them out and how they connect together. So this is my final drawing. This is the conclusion, the summary of what I have. This is my report. And we see outer space with the planet, and we see the alien on the left, and we see the technical structure on the right. The planet was so beautiful. I suddenly saw, the interesting thing is that usually in remote viewing, I get an element and then I probe on it and I figure out what it is, or I piece together different elements together and I build a structure which is a composite of different elements that fit together. The planet just came. It didn't start early in the session. I didn't work my way to it. It was just shown to me as a perfect photographic video quality picture out of nowhere, and I got it 2 times. It was so beautiful. The planet is yellow and it has a blue colored ring consisting of rocks, so similar to Saturn in that sense. I noted during the session that the sky and the atmosphere where the alien creature was, it was yellow. So it's interesting here also that the planet appears as yellow. It would have a yellow sky. The creature I drew on the left is the alien. And I wanted to write on the top, ancient astronaut, but I didn't want to write on this drawing at all. We see that it's a bipedal, white-colored creature. I would have otherwise colored it. And it has no ears, as you can see. This interesting tubing, I drew one creature from 2 perspectives so that we can see how the tubing goes behind the neck of the creature, and it goes down on the front from the front on the face as well. I didn't probe, I could have probed this tube to figure out what it is, but I didn't. So we're just left with the picture. On the right, I drew again the recording device, and we see the writing on the interior wall. The writing will appear on the inside wall, and the same writing can also be seen on the outside, on both sides of the wall, and there is a hole in the center that leads down. And inside of this, so the writing is on the wall of this cylinder, and from this hole you have the emitter, which I drew on picture 4, and it emits something. And this whole structure can record sound, but I've also heard it emitting sound. And this was created for posterity. These creatures have recorded their history on this device, and they wish for someone in posterity to find it and know about them. To me, it was sad and tragic about them leaving, and I also saw one of the creatures, probably the one I was talking to, it was lying down and dying. It was very sad for me to see. It really affected me. So this is the last drawing. This is what my report constructed for you from the signal.
I thought I'd ask you, is there anything else you would like to add on at this point, just regarding the project itself?
Well, I might say something about hearing speech or communicating with a life form on an RV target. As far as I understand it, it's not really done in remote viewing to communicate two-way dialogue with someone, and speech as well. As far as I've been told, once I started experiencing that I can hear thoughts from people as well as animals from targets, it was kind of a controversial topic in the RV community. And I also considered for a long time simply ignoring that kind of data stream from RV because I didn't really know if it was an acceptable form of data. But once I started doing solved missing person cases for remote viewing, that is when I started having a strong stream of thoughts as well as speech from people on targets. And I was able to compare that to the feedback. And I discovered that the content of thoughts and speech from RV in my remote viewing is highly consistent with the feedback. I still can't say if the dialogue that I experience is accurate or if it's a simulation, if it's simply tapping on consciousness of the being and somehow interacting with it, or if it's a genuine form of two-way dialogue. However, when it comes to extraterrestrials and Zeta Reticuli in particular, which was the theme of this target, it's clear that a lot of people, I would say pretty much everyone who remote views these Zeta Reticuli, experience that the beings can see the remote viewer, can feel their touch and talks to them. So that's a very common thing.
I try not to limit what I expect of a viewer. I either the data is good and it's on target, or it's not, or it's similar and there is some kind of noise. But I never want to tell a viewer that some data that they're taking in or feeling is not valid. I think everything is absolutely valid when it comes to this. So if you have this skill with talking to someone else, be it their higher consciousness or them personally on their own intellectual level, I think no matter where it's coming from, it's important to include. So I'm very thankful and happy that you took the time to write all of that out. Because I thought it was very illuminating and very interesting, especially if it gives us an insight to how they communicate and how they think. I think that's so exciting that you got to touch the mind of this creature. And
it touched mine.
Yeah.
It came to me right away.
Amazing. That's
it came
wonderful.
to me. I didn't have to go to it. It was very well aware of me, and it was so friendly, and it was so happy to see me, and it was so willing to talk to me. But it didn't appreciate being push probed and tap probed and flicked on.
Well, I'm sure that there are people that are watching this video hearing about aliens not liking being probed and thinking, okay, well, that's what you get. So, yeah, that's I think that's one of the biggest alien stereotypes that has ever existed, that they like to probe people. And so the idea of us probing them back, I don't know. I'm gonna stop right there.